Hey folks, Mr. Howard here again to record another chapter of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Hope you're all doing well. We're still hanging in here. I'm in my guest room in quarantine, only quiet room in the house. Kids are upstairs watching, I think, Transformers at the moment before they start their schooling for the day. Apologies in advance if you hear a lot of clunking from the other room. We're running laundry. These things happen when you're in quarantine. My son locked the cat in the bedroom with him last night, and he was sleeping with the cat, and the cat decided to pee on him. Rude awakening this morning. So now I've got his sheets and laundry in the wash, and that's running. These things happen, I guess, when you stay home all day, every day, and I just miss them because I'm at work. Normally I'd be at school, knee-deep in the Odyssey with my 9th graders. And that's sort of bittersweet today, especially after the announcement yesterday that Virginia schools will be closed for the rest of the year. But the truth is, this is homeschooling. This is what it's about. I feel like we lose that a lot of times in grades. You focus so much on what grade you're going to get and how you're going to be assessed on the work that you do that you lose focus on what you're trying to do, which is expand your mind, expand your thinking, improve your analytical abilities, your reasoning, your ability to understand, in my case, literature, and express that understanding in meaningful ways. And here's an opportunity to sort of take back education and make it meaningful to you and learn the things that you want to learn, and be assessed on your own terms. What do I need to achieve before college? That's the question to ask yourself. That's what I'm trying to achieve here with these lectures. So hopefully, you enjoy and continue to read along. Quick recap: we did yesterday. I released a number of lectures. I did sort of a introduction, which I won't recap except to say that we're looking at some particular themes: romanticism versus realism, truth and beauty, loss of innocence, or original sin or fall from grace, and then finally Hellenism versus medievalism, Hellenism being Greek and medieval being like the Middle Ages. That's something that we want to look at, and we'll continue to talk about those themes. We talked about the preface and how it sort of segued some of the ideas that Wilde is trying to get at in this book about art. It's about a picture. And so his theory of art, his manifesto of art, makes sense as a preface to this book in particular, which is about the influence of art on an individual human being. We haven't really seen that yet, but we will. We're going to get introduced to Dorian Gray in this chapter too. We also were introduced to Lord Henry Wotton and Basil Hallward, our two main figures, who are also allegorical on a number of levels. Lord Henry is sort of a Satan figure, never says a moral thing, rails against modern education and marriage and all these things that are sort of institutions. He hides behind intelligence instead of emotion. He always uses intelligence as a way to counteract morality, trying to create logic and often logical fallacies and paradoxes to lure the reader or whoever he's talking to into believing things that are immoral. So he's a really interesting character. He also uses a lot of Greek allusions because he represents sort of Hellenism, or this Greek ideal. And I think that's important. And he's a realist. He's really interested in surface meanings and surface beauties and stuff like that. And then you got Basil Hallward, who's the painter. He's the creator. He produced the painting. He sees the best in people. He's very much a romantic. He never believes the bad things that Harry says. He and Harry have this long-term relationship that seems to go back years and years. They both tolerate each other. I don't know what they have in common. It seems like very little. He's created this beautiful portrait, the picture of Dorian Gray, which he says he's afraid has shown the secret of his soul. Now, from Victorian society, that might be the secret that he's gay, but if he's an allegory for God, the creator, then, if Dorian Gray is the picture that he has created, he's afraid that he's shown the secret of his own soul in there. That's something about, created in God's image and sort of like this Christian overlay that's going on there that I think is interesting as well. And then right before the chapter ends, Parker, the butler, announces that Dorian Gray has arrived, and Basil asks, almost begs Lord Henry not to influence Dorian because he's pure and beautiful and unspoiled. When you look at that through the Garden of Eden allegory, and when you go back earlier and when you say that Lord Henry is sure that he is brainless, I think that's the word he uses, sort of stupid or uneducated, ignorant, before knowledge, person, you can start to feel like this picture that Oscar Wilde created is kind of important and thematic. And that's only one chapter in. So we're going to hit chapter 2 today. I'll read chapter 2 and I'll hold the analysis to the recap before chapter 3, and I'll do sort of what I'm doing here. Obviously, I'll analyze little bits and pieces as we go through. But hopefully you enjoy the reading, and yeah. Chapter 2. As they entered, they saw Dorian Gray. He was seated at the piano with his back to them, turning over the pages of a volume of Schumann's forest scenes. "You must lend me these, Basil," he cried. "I want to learn them. They are perfectly charming." "That entirely depends on how you sit today, Dorian." "Oh, I am tired of sitting, and I don't want a life-size portrait of myself," added the lad, swinging around on the music stool in a willful, petulant manner. When he caught sight of Lord Henry, a faint blush colored his cheek for a moment, and he started up. "I beg your pardon, Basil, but I didn't know you had anyone with you." "This is Lord Henry Wotton, Dorian, an old Oxford friend of mine. I have just been telling him what a capital sitter you were, and now you have spoiled everything." "You have not spoiled my pleasure in meeting you, Mr. Gray," said Lord Henry, stepping forward and extending his hand. "My aunt has often spoken to me about you. You are one of her favourites, and, I am afraid, one of her victims also." "I am in Lady Agatha's black books at present," answered Dorian, with a funny look of penitence. "I promised to go to a club in Whitechapel with her last Tuesday, and I really forgot all about it. We were to have played a duet together. 3 duets, I believe. I don't know what she will say to me. I am far too frightened to call." Pause. I think it's interesting that Dorian, even in his initial characterizations, is portrayed as very young and innocent, acting like a child. He's willful, he's petulant, he's swinging around on a stool, he's afraid to talk to his aunt because he's disappointed her, and so therefore avoiding her. These are all like childlike reactions and behaviors. "Oh, I will make your peace with my aunt. She is quite devoted to you, and I don't think it really matters about your not being there. The audience probably thought it was a duet. When Aunt Agatha sits down to the piano, she makes quite enough noise for 2 people. "That's very horrid to her and not very nice to me," answered Dorian, laughing. Lord Henry looked at him. Yes, he was certainly wonderfully handsome, with his finely curved scarlet lips, his frank blue eyes, his crisp gold hair. There was something in his face that made one trust him at once. All the candor of youth was there, as well as all youth's passionate purity. One felt that he had kept himself unspotted from the world. Pause again. Unspotted from the world. No wonder Basil Hallward worshipped him. "You are too charming to go in for philanthropy, Mr. Gray. Far too charming." And Lord Henry flung himself down on the divan and opened his cigarette case. The painter had been busy mixing his colors and getting his brushes ready. He looked worried, and when he heard Lord Henry's last remark, he glanced at him, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Harry, I want you to finish this picture today. Would you think it awfully rude of me if I asked you to go away?" Lord Henry smiled and looked at Dorian Gray. "Am I to go, Mr. Gray?" he asked. "Oh, please don't, Lord Henry. I see Basil's in one of his sulky moods, and I can't bear him when he sulks. Besides, I want you to tell me why I should not go in for philanthropy." "I don't know that I shall tell you that, Mr. Gray. It is so tedious a subject that one would have to talk seriously about it. But I certainly shall not run away now that you have asked me to stop. You really don't mind, Basil, do you? You have often told me that you liked your sitters to have someone to chat to." Hallward bit his lip. "If Dorian wishes it, of course you must stay. Dorian's whims are laws to everybody except himself." Lord Henry took up his hat and gloves. "You are very pressing, Basil, but I am afraid I must go. I have promised to meet a man at the Orleans. Goodbye, Mr. Gray. Come and see me some afternoon in Curzon Street. I am nearly always at home at 5 o'clock. Write to me when you are coming. I should be sorry to miss you." "Basil," cried Dorian Gray, "if Lord Henry Wotton goes, I shall go too. You never open your lips while you are painting, and it is horribly dull standing on a platform and trying to look pleasant. Ask him to stay. I insist upon it." "Stay, Harry, to oblige Dorian and to oblige me," said Hallward, gazing intently at his picture. "It is quite true. I never talk while I am working, and I never listen either, and it must be dreadfully tedious to my unfortunate sitters. I beg you to stay." "And what about my man at the Orleans?" The painter laughed. "I don't think there will be any difficulty about that. Sit down again, Harry. And now, Dorian, get up on the platform and don't move about too much, or pay any attention to what Lord Henry says. He has a very bad influence over all of his friends, with a single exception of myself." Pause. I think this is funny that, if allegorically Basil's a god figure, he never listens while he's working and never talks either, and it must be very tedious to his sitters. If his sitters are humanity, that's kind of funny. But also, it's interesting that Lord Henry has a really terrible influence on everybody he comes in contact with the single exception of Basil, who he doesn't influence in any way. Dorian Gray stepped up to the dais with the air of a young Greek martyr and made a little moo of discontent to Lord Henry, to whom he had rather taken a fancy. He was someone like Basil. They made a delightful contrast. Here we are slipping into Dorian's mind. So again, narrator is omniscient and goes wherever he wants to. They made a delightful contrast, and he had such a beautiful voice. After a few moments, he said to him, "Have you really a very bad influence, Lord Henry? As bad as Basil says?" "And there is no such thing as a good influence, Mr. Gray. All influence is immoral. Immoral from a scientific point of view." "Why?" "And because to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. He does not think his natural thoughts or burn with his natural passions. His virtues are not real to him. His sins, if there are such things as sins, are borrowed. He becomes an echo of someone else's music, an actor in a part that has not been written for him. The aim of life is development. To realize one's nature perfectly, that is what each of us is here for. People are afraid of themselves nowadays. They have forgotten the highest of all duties, the duty that one owes to oneself. Now, of course, they are charitable. They feed the hungry and clothe the beggar, but their own souls starve and are naked. Courage has gone out of our race. Perhaps we never really had it. The terror of society, which is the basis of morals, the terror of God, which is the secret of religion, these are the two things that govern us. And yet..." Pause. Wow, there was a lot there. Here's Lord Henry warning Dorian about the dangers of influence. He says to influence a person is to give him one's own soul. We're talking about Dorian's soul all of a sudden. Of course, Lord Henry says this and then proceeds to influence him. You can watch that as time goes on. There's a little irony there. He does not think his natural thoughts are burned with his natural passion. Suddenly we have burning imagery in here with Lord Henry talking. His virtues are not real to him, his sins. And then he throws this little offhand comment in there. If there are such things as sins, undermining the idea of sins, are borrowed. He becomes an echo of someone else's music. It's interesting we throw music in here because, biblically, I think Lucifer was the angel of music before he became Satan. So I think that's interesting. He becomes an echo of someone else's music, an actor of a part that has not been written for him. So then he says the aim of life is self-development. And, he throws this idea in here that the most important duty that a person has is a duty to themselves. And they're starving their own soul by being charitable and kind and moral and these kinds of things. And at the end, he says, the terror of society, which is the basis of morals, the terror of God, which is the secret of religion, these are the two things that govern us. So according to Lord Henry, we do what's right, not because it's right, but because we're afraid of what other people will think or what the law says. Or, religion gives you the carrot of heaven and the stick of hell to lure and beat you into correct moral behaviors. And these are the only reasons that people are moral, and they're scared to be immoral. So he's throwing these sort of things out there, and I think it's worth analyzing them. "Just turn your head a little more to the right, Dorian, like a good boy," said the painter, deep in his work and conscious only that a look had come into the lad's face that he had never seen there before. "And yet," continued Lord Henry in his low, musical voice, and with that graceful wave of the hand that was always so characteristic of him, and that he had even in his Eton days, "I believe that if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, expression to every thought, reality to every dream, I believe the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget all the maladies of medievalism and return to the Hellenic ideal, to something finer, richer than the Hellenic ideal, it may be. But the bravest man among us is afraid of himself. The mutilation of the savage has its tragic survival in the self-denial that mars our lives. We are punished for our refusals. Every impulse that we strive to strangle broods in the mind and poisons us. The body sins once and has done with its sin, for action is a mode of purification. Nothing remains then but the recollection of a pleasure or the luxury of a regret. The only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. Resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing for the things it has forbidden to itself, with desire for what its monstrous laws have made monstrous and unlawful. It has been said that the great events of the world take place in the brain. It is in the brain, and in the brain only, that the greatest sins